Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City. This is John Massengale, sitting in the studio in Austin, Texas, joined by my friend and co-host Les Kaiser in his home studio. Good morning, Mr. Kaiser.
Good morning. Good morning. British GP, here we go.
That's right. We are about an hour and 7 or 8 minutes from the British Grand Prix and one of the most iconic races on the Formula One calendar. And I know that we are excited. I'm sure you are too. And I'm sure that Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, and George Russell, the British drivers, are excited for the British Grand Prix as well. Les,
Absolutely.
what are you excited about for the British Grand Prix? Most of all, more than anything, I know there's lots of interesting stories that we're going to get to, but what's it got you fired up about it today?
Oh, actually, for one, that it's happening.
Yeah.
Two, it looks like a good race. And last I checked the weather a while ago, there was nothing about any serious rain or British aspects to it weather-wise. So I like the sound of that. Really looks good. Hamilton had some flub ups over the weekend so far. That's interesting. Valtteri was keeping the pressure on him, looking really good. A few other things like that, just more driver centric.
Yeah, well, I like your first comment that the fact that we're having a race is the most important. And so, yeah, it's the fourth round of this strange and shortened 2020 Formula One Championship season. So we're excited to have racing. But I guess probably the biggest story of the weekend to start was when Sergio Perez, tested positive, and they had to get on the phone. The Racing Point team did and bring up Nico Hulkenberg to come take his car and race. And I know there was a lot of people around the world that were excited about that. And Hulkenberg's, everybody said that he should be driving a car, and the fact that he gets to jump in a car and do it, it's exciting for a lot of people. But yeah, that's a pretty big deal that we had our first driver positive test for this season. And of course, Formula One being Formula One has got their bubble system figured out, and so they
Correct.
just plugged in the pieces and kept on going.
Yeah, it really seems to be working well when you considered how few cases have come out. When they talk about just in the general populace of the world, how many cases break out, and quite honestly, at this point, I don't know of anybody that doesn't know somebody that's had it. And so I think in this realm of them moving that many people around together, magnificent job, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, but it doesn't surprise me though. It's like, and by the way, we don't have Dave O'Neill and Jonathan Green. I'll mention that those guys are both out working at racetracks this weekend. So, and we will not have them on the show today. So I'd love to get Dave's insight on this, but he talked about it earlier in the season. He said, knowing Formula One, I figured that would be one of the best places, one of the safest places in the world to be is in the Formula One paddock, knowing how they are. But with Sergio Perez, I'm just looking at an article on Formula1.com talking about how he had, he described it as the saddest day of his career, not being able to come and race, and he said he is not suffering any symptoms, so he's asymptomatic. And if you recall, Les, the way it came down is, I guess it was Friday morning or Thursday morning when he was coming to the track doing the normal testing, and he had an inconclusive test, and so they said, "Well, you got to go back and make sure." And so he went back and tested positive, and but again, asymptomatic. And how common is that we hear about people that are not having any symptoms? But that's exactly why Formula One has this system that they do, the bubble, where they do all this testing and they keep everybody on within his sphere isolated so they can plug in all new people. And I'd like to, in fact, we're going to have Gunther Steiner back on probably pretty quick, and I want to ask him about how they do that, how they have everyone around them plugged in, and how they isolate them individually. That'll be interesting to see. But yeah, what do you think about the Hulk coming up, Les?
Love it. He's always been a good guy in the paddock. proven very well on track. Good personality with fans, a lot of fan base. I think it's good for the sport. For one, he's proven why he was so well liked coming in and dropping right back in the seat, performing very well. Some people said, "Oh, it's not a surprise. That's Hulk." Well, to me, that just reinforces how good of a driver he is. That it's no surprise he jumped right back in really good form. Just imagine what he could do if he could have a few more days in the seat and then show up to the race.
Yeah, he was funny. They were talking to him and asking him, after the first time in the car, and he was saying, "Man, the G forces is, because he's been out of a car for 8 months," and you think, well, that's not that. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but obviously it was. He was talking about that it was a shock to the system, and also particularly in Silverstone. If you think about it, that's a really high speed circuit, and he ended up qualifying 13th, just outside the top 10 there, but a 0.65 seconds, a 0.065 off Q3. So anyway, he just talked about how it was interesting to me that he talked about the G forces and how he wasn't really in race ready. So but that's going to
Yeah,
be a really good story to watch for sure for this whole weekend.
one of the
And
things that I heard mentioned specifically about him was his neck strength is down. Well, that's one of the aspects that you can't really replicate the G forces on your neck and head
mhm.
in a manner that is exacting for what he experienced. So makes sense that was one of the issues that he was dealing with. I mean, you can do the planks with your head hanging off the table in all the directions, but it's still not the same.
Yeah. So that was definitely one of the biggest stories. We're going to talk a lot about qualifying here in just a minute, but um, I do want to mention that George Russell suffered a 5-place grid penalty for ignoring yellow flags, and we've seen a bit of that lately, haven't we, Les? You were just talking about it before we went on the air.
Absolutely. I feel like I've heard it more frequently than usual. And that kind of raises a question. Has something changed? Is there a different temperament around it? Are drivers seeing other drivers kind of get away with pushing the limits a little bit on yellow flags? To me, the yellow flag needs to be addressed because it only, by the rules and the verbiage around it, you must let off and slow down when you see a yellow flag. That's pretty indiscriminate. Hey, I did. I went from 160 miles per hour to 159 miles per hour. See, here's the data.
Yeah, here's the throttle position sensor data where I was at 100% and I dropped off to 95%.
Yeah, I feel like there should be a speed limit set on that. We've seen it in other courses where they will set a speed limit. Well, for that matter, pit lane, yellow flag speed limit is going to be X, and that is that. Really feel like that is something that would reel in the things, treat it like that virtual safety car we saw running previously, so that everybody maintains pace. If it is or everybody slows down the same amount as they get to the yellow flag zone.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. It has been a bunch lately. So, also Daniel Kvyat was penalized 5 grid pace penalty for an unscheduled gearbox change this weekend. But, we were talking about the British drivers and George Russell, and man, he has been impressive really since he got to Williams. And I think he's out-qualified his teammate every single time, I believe. And he did a great job, got himself into to Q2, but so he ended up qualifying 15th, but he's going to start 20th because of that grid penalty. So, but yeah, man, the British drivers, so all of them unbelievably impressive right now. George Russell, fantastic, and Lando Norris, he has been a superstar both on the racetrack and on the computer and on Twitter, and of course Lewis Hamilton had a phenomenal weekend. But Les, what about the story of the young Lando Norris giving up his helmet design to a young 6-year-old girl? I'm assuming you saw that helmet.
I saw the helmet. I didn't really get a lot of details on the backstory, but somewhere through social media, he became aware of this young girl and the drawing that she had done, and had it applied to his helmet. Totally cool. Like I said, I don't have a lot of great detail on that.
Well, it was cool that he allowed this to happen. And, you know, when I first saw it, I just thought it was kind of an artistic, and I didn't realize what the story was. But yeah, it's this 6-year-old fan where he obviously went out there on social media and ran a little competition to get the submissions. So it's been a big hit this weekend. Actually, the television commentators and everybody's been talking about it. So anyway, that was a cool story. But I tell you what, Les, why don't we start? Let's at least run down, and before this first break, run down the starting grid, the qualifying, and then starting grid. So qualifying, Lewis Hamilton on top of qualifying at his home race, and Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen third, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll, Carlos Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon, and Sebastian Vettel all the way down in 10th for Ferrari. Then Pierre Gasly, Alexander Albon, Nico Hulkenberg, Daniel Kvyat, George Russell, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, Antonio Giovinazzi in the Alpha, Kimi Raikkonen, then Roman Grosjean and Nicholas Latifi. And no giant surprises there. Probably the biggest surprise, Sebastian Vettel down in 10th. And, how many? So Leclerc in fourth, but look at the gap between Leclerc and Vettel. I mean, this is just not great for Sebastian Vettel, Les.
Absolutely. What the Ferrari, Seb? What's going on? It, his head just doesn't seem in the game right now. And to me, we've seen glimpses of that more in his conversation. That he's much more aloof during those conversations, those interviews, than I'll say where he's really been game on, very technical things like that. I really think that we'll talk about the rumors again around Seb, but gosh, is his head still in the game?
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I've said it before. I think that's where Vettel's problem is right now. So we will see what happens the rest of the year. But I mean, he's just been totally outclassed by Leclerc. And in fact, I was just looking at in Q3, Leclerc's time was 125, 427. And Vettel, I mean, you almost have to scroll on the F1 website to get down to Vettel, 126, 339. So, I mean, that's just almost a full second. So, and I know he had a little bit of trouble in the weekend too. He had to miss some time due to mechanical issues, but still, and you got to figure that always throws a driver off, a la Lando Norris. I mean, excuse me, Alexander Albon had some issues this weekend and had a really bad weekend, honestly, so far. So, I mean,
Hey, well, you can't skip who's sitting between Vettel and Alex Albon. Now, I've been watching Albon for a while, watching him perform and not get noticed. Now I got to turn the tables. Look who's in between. Pierre Gasly sitting between Vettel and Albon.
yeah, I know where you're
I
going
think
with that.
Albon better be sweating a bit.
Red Bull is just known for having zero tolerance and quick to pull the trigger on a driver when they are not performing, as we've seen a bunch in the last few years. So you got to be nervous if you're Albon, but I don't know if they're ready to do that yet. I think you gotta give him a chance here, but because he looked good, he's looked really good on and off, and he's had a fantastic career leading up to this in the lesser Formula Series. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. No, I wouldn't sweat too much, Albon, but you better show why you're sitting in a Red Bull seat and not an Alpha Centauri seat.
Alpha Centauri.
We're just gonna
uh,
start making up names. Look at these names on grid nowadays. Come on, we're just gonna make them up.
there you go. All right, well, let's go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we're going to break down the qualifying and really amazing lap, of course, by Lewis Hamilton. But we're going to break it all down for you. Listen to Speed City on SiriusXM. Be back after these messages.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
There we go. Now, either the caffeine is kicking in, or it's Sammy Hagar or Max Verstappen getting me fired up because we're about 52 minutes from the British Grand Prix, and we don't have our Brits in studio. Neither one of them. Jonathan Green.
Oh, no! Oh, mayhem!
Yes.
Dave's not here, man.
Or Dave O'Neill. The Brits are not in the house. Both of them out there at the racetracks across the United States are working. But, man, we are excited because the British Grand Prix is one of those special Grand Prix. And I always look forward to this one because, there's part of the reason is that it's you have that fun crowd over there, which is not going to be there today, which they've all talked about. But it is one of these iconic racetracks and iconic races. And really, it's if you didn't have this on the calendar this year, we're just really sickened is probably the best word, to not have Circuit of the Americas on the calendar this year. And it's, I guess, since we've been on Sirius, we haven't talked about that, but we had Bobby Epstein on our local show here in Austin, and he talked about all that. And we're going to have a lot of those. We're going to pull some of those clips from our local show and have them on the post-race show. But without Austin, we got to get excited about the ones we got. So British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And, Les, there's been a bunch of wind out there this weekend, and drivers have talked about that. But let's talk about the track a little bit, too. It's a 3.6-mile circuit. It's fast. It's definitely a driver's circuit. You obviously in Formula One, the machines are such a vital part of racing. But at Silverstone, it's a lot about the drivers, too.
You bet. Maggot Beckett is highly regarded as one of the fastest series of curbs of the nature of it. And quite honestly, that's why when Kevin Schwantz took his piece in designing the Circuit of the Americas, he included a section that mimicked the Maggot Beckett portion of that. Really interesting series. Kevin took pieces from all over the world to throw in on his part of the design. But it is a very special place. Silverstone has been there since the beginning, it feels like. And so the technical portions of it, and it's been, finessed as time went on, but still a great technical site. Yeah. One of the things, as you said, you mentioned the audience isn't there. Yeah, sadly, there's a lot of changes if you haven't seen any of the F1 races yet this year. Press is not allowed in pit lane. All those guys are sitting across in the grandstand, looking across the field, looking across the street or the racetrack at the garages and pit lanes themselves. They were talking about the impact of an audience at a Formula One race. It's rare that a Formula One driver will actually hear that audience during the course of the race, but they say just the motivation, the sight of the audience could be a tenth of a second on a lap. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty sizable when you look at the way the grid turned out.
Yeah, it's true. It's just like we talk about home field advantage in a lot of American sports. Look at particularly the NBA. It's a huge home field advantage statistically. I think you would argue in virtually any sport, home field advantage is worth something. And I think it is in racing as well. So, hey, you talked about Silverstone being there since the beginning. Of course, they were there. They hosted the very first round in 1950. And they've been the permanent home since 1987. So, yes, Silverstone has about as much history as any circuit on the calendar every year. So it is a very special place. It's 3.66 miles, like I said, 5.8 kilometers, 52 laps, and about 190-mile total race distance. And they'll say the cars they'll see between 204 and 209 miles an hour. So it's obviously a fast track too. So yes, Silverstone is an exciting race for us, but let's get into the nitty-gritty about qualifying, because let's talk about Lewis Hamilton's pole position first of all, because
it included a pirouette leaving one turn.
Yeah, the final lap did not, but before that, earlier in qualifying, he did. He spun and red flagged the session. I mean, he threw rocks all over the track, and and Bottas had been looking really fast already, and you think, it immediately every time I see Hamilton make a mistake, which is not very often, I honestly I can't help but think, okay, is this the beginning of the decline for Hamilton? Because he just doesn't make that many mistakes, right? And so when I hear that, I mean, when I see him, I think that, and I can't help it. He, uh, but he obviously, got to see a side by side of Hamilton and Bottas on on that final qualifying lap, and he he had one tiny little niggle in the entire lap, and so he ended up beating Bottas lap by three hundredths, and of course taking pole position away from his teammate. But Les, once again, Hamilton proves that a little mistake doesn't bother him, and he comes through and pulls one out of the hat.
One of the things I saw this week was a conversation online about Formula One is boring because of Hamilton. And okay, I get it. We had the same thing with Schumacher back in the day of, oh, it's always Schumacher out front. Isn't it time they did something to Schumacher not to make him as fast? And I was like, wait. No. You don't penalize the guy that's following the rules and scoring all the wins. Where the weight relies on are the rest of the teams on the field and grid to get up to that point. And so I get it. You're tired of watching Hamilton out front. He's spectacular. I don't care if you like the guy or not.
Yeah.
He's a spectacular driver. Mercedes is on their game. They're doing everything right. They're exploring things, DAS and exhaust spoilers and all these things. That's what we look for from Formula One. It is that exploration. We look for that expertise. It kind of makes, some of the guys back at the back of the grid, George Russell on the back and Kvyat and Latifi, says it kind of diminishes how talented they are. But I can bet that most of their audience, especially me, can't make that grid.
Yeah. I mean, the argument is, in fact, somebody asked me this weekend, in a social distancing event, actually. They said, is it true if you put somebody else in the car, if you took, somebody from towards the back of the grid and put them in the Mercedes car, would they win the championship? And there's always an argument for that, because as we know, in Formula One, the machinery can make, and everybody around them, actually, so don't give it all the credit to the car, but it's a team sport, and more than likely you could put a good bit of the grid in that car and they're going to fight for the championship. But just like I said a minute ago, Hamilton just doesn't make that many mistakes. And the fact that he can make a mistake and immediately come back and I said 300, it was 0.3 faster than Bottas in that last qualifying lap. So the fact that he can do that, but he does it time after time. And, when you see him make mistakes, it's typically not when it really, really counts. So, I mean, I know it was that last spin was getting pretty close to that, but still, I think that he is pretty arguably, but I think everybody would argue right now, if it's not Hamilton, it's the best driver in F1, it might be, or in racing, period, it might be Max Verstappen. But, I mean, you take some of those young guys like George Russell or Charles Leclerc or Lando Norris, you might also make that same argument. But, man, it's very hard to argue with Lewis Hamilton. So, but let's talk about.
Think of with Lewis. Well, let's flip over our motorcycle buddies. Marc Marquez has much of the same kind of response to his mistakes or obstacles that he runs across. I remember us here at Circuit of America watching him do the 100-yard dash fully garbed after his primary bike died, and he ran back down the pit lane, jumped on the secondary bike, and went out and set a hot lap. That is the mindset that I see in common with Lewis, is that when things go wrong, that's when he really gets in his groove.
And that is unusual because you see so many drivers that, and anybody in any sport, you see an NFL quarterback throw an interception, and how many times do you see where they'll end up throwing more or don't recover from that and have a bad game? So, that's a mental strength thing. You put it behind you, as they say in any sport. You put that behind you and you move on. And that's exactly what Hamilton did on that lap. So let's look down the grid a little bit. It's a tough position to be in Bottas's seat because of Hamilton, but Bottas had a good weekend so far as well and looked great and looked like he might actually take the pole again because he's done that already this year. Max Verstappen in third, and so the times. So Hamilton's time was in Q3 1:24.3, Bottas 1:24.6, and Verstappen 1:25.3. So Verstappen in third, a full second behind Lewis Hamilton. I mean, it almost feels like that gap could be more or less. I mean, I feel like the gap to Red Bull could be even more. And then not actually very close to him in the Ferrari, Charles Leclerc at 1:25.4. So Ferrari, we've been saying they're now a mid-pack team, but that's a good performance by Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen for that matter. What do you think?
I agree. Max and Charles are phenomenal. I love how much they dice it up. Max is more the bully on track, but by all means, great talent in both of those. Max does like Silverstone, and so I think we're gonna see him really pushing a challenge and catch up. Watch Max at the start. Max is, as I said, he's stubborn, he's bullheaded, he's all of that, and we love him for what he pulls off. Might hate him for what he screws up, but we love him for what he pulls off. And this is a good one for the first turn, the battle into the first turn.
Watch Max Verstappen. I'm going to cut that clip and we'll play it every week. How about that, Les?
That's pretty much it. If he's not in front, he's charging for the first turn extra hard.
All right, well, let's get ready for our next break here. I want to give out the phone number. Now everybody's hopefully you're awake. You got some coffee. You're getting ready for the race. Phone number to give us a call if you want to join the show, 512-643-LIVE, 512-643-5483. When we come back, we'll continue our prep for the British Grand Prix, which is 40 minutes away. You listen to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. Back after these messages.
Hi guys, this is Pierre Gasly and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We're about a half hour or so, a little more than that, from the British Grand Prix for 2020. This is John Massengill sitting in studio and joined by Les Kaiser from his home studio. Hey, Les, we were talking earlier about Sergio Perez testing positive and not being at the race. So as soon as that happened, you know, the rumors started flying. Who's it going to be? Was it going to be Hülkenberg? Was Stoffel Van Dorn's name was thrown around? But did you notice all the other drivers from around the world kind of chiming in on social media? I'm looking at a tweet from Alexander Rossi right after the announcement. He was like, cough.
I love that. I saw his.
He said, Racing Point, it said, I know Silverstone pretty well. So Alexander Rossi jumped out there. Louis Delatraz says, he goes, I have a super license. And of course, that was the thing, is you got to have a super license. But there were drivers all over the place. Who did you see?
Well, yeah, Rossi was the one that made me laugh out loud. I see his social media directly as well. You know, I wish Jonathan or Dave were here, because I was questioning that. So Rossi had a super license, but what are the conditions? He hadn't been in an F1 car in a while. How does that play out with a license? And for these guys jumping back in?
You know, I started thinking about it, and Hülkenberg was pretty much the obvious choice, besides all of the connections, you know, to the team already and all that. But, I mean, you think about somebody like Alexander Rossi, yeah, great driver, right? Fantastic driver. He's proven that. But it's been a while since he's been in an F1 car, and I just, you know, as much as I would love to see any American driver in the sport, I just don't think I would have even considered that, honestly, because, you know, Hülkenberg had been in a car a lot more recently, and, you know, I don't know. Argue with me if you feel that way, but I just don't think. I think it was the smartest move, and I don't think I would have gone outside of somebody had been that long since they've been in F1.
Exactly. I can't begin to argue against Hülkenberg on so many levels, and certainly against, you know, Rossi. Sorry, dude. You know, we love you, but Alexander Rossi has not been in a car in this current design. The car he was in last time he was in an F1 car was not competitive in those days.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, I'd love, you know, the emotion and the joy of seeing Alexander jump in a car. That'd be great. But honestly, if I was a team manager sitting in, you know, Dave's seat, it would be, nope, that's not the guy that I want to take a 1 or 2 race trial with.
Yeah.
So got to go with Hülkenberg.
Well, let's keep running down the qualifying grid, because we've touched on Lewis Hamilton first, Valtteri Bottas, and then Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc. But Lando Norris continues to impress in qualifying for Renault. Lando's in 5th, starting the race in 5th, and his Q3 lap was a 125.782. So he was about 0.3 off Leclerc in the Ferrari. And I'm going to mention the next driver, because Lance Stroll in that super fast pink Mercedes for Racing Point, as they call it, was a 125.839. So really close. But Lando Norris, man, continues to impress here at his home race. He talked about the fact that he misses the crowd, of course. But man, Les, I really think he just feels like a future superstar, doesn't he?
He does. He's really up there doing stuff and showing so well now. He no longer, I will say, he is getting away from the stigma of being a daddy bought seat. And I'm happy to see that happen.
Well, okay, yeah, you're saying Lance Stroll. Well, yeah, I was saying that Lando Norris feels like the superstar, but hey, we got to give credit to Lance Stroll, because I mean, look, we got to eat some of our own words, because we said it early on, is like, you know, he got this seat because of his dad, but he's proven that because he was pulling faster laps some of the time than Checo Perez, who really is a really great Formula One driver. So yeah, I'm gonna say that Lance Stroll has done what he's needed to do to probably, you know, how about this? Let's say you're not that the team's not owned by his dad, and would you take, who would you take, Les? You've got Lance Stroll, you've got Vettel in the mix potentially for next year, and Checo Perez. Who would you do? Who would you take?
That to me comes down to a lot of the dollar values around it because Sebastian Vettel, 4-time champion, you can't negate that. But is it worth the money? And what's he going to do? I mean, we've seen situations where great drivers get in cars that just don't fit their style and they don't work out. Is that something that we would see from Vettel in one of these? That I don't know. That's tough. I'd love to see Vettel on the pink Panzer. It's just something else. The car is performing great, but again, the budget for Vettel's got to be stout. Lance, I don't know. He may still be living in his daddy's basement, but he's performing fantastic and showing his skills.
Well, I guess, if it came down to, do I want my team to be? I think Sergio Perez is on my team. If I didn't have, if you just took all the money away from it, even then, I'd probably say Perez. And would you take Lance Stroll over Sebastian Vettel? That's the crazy thing, that you never thought you'd even make that argument. So, I think
I would love to see Seb in the pink Mercedes going against Hamilton.
I don't know, man. Look where he is today. 10th place. Did not look good. So I think that I don't have. I'm just glad I don't have to make that call, but I don't know. It'd be a tough one. So let's keep going down our qualifying grid. So we talked about Lando Norris and Lance Stroll, 5th, 6th. Carlos Sainz in the other McLaren. He had a 125.9. So just, they're really tight in the field there. So just right behind Lance Stroll with his 125.8. So Carlos Sainz in 7th, Daniel Ricciardo, and just right behind him, a few hundredths behind him, in 9th place in his Renault. So, and then Esteban Ocon right behind Daniel Ricciardo, just a couple of tenths behind him, and then Sebastian Vettel. What about any of those? Sainz, Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon, or Vettel, Les? What stands out there for you? We'll go back to Vettel because that's a whole, Ferrari having a problem.
Carlos Sainz keeps winding up as an understated driver. There's not enough noise about him. He is an excellent driver. 2nd gen. His dad is rocking it out in other sports. I just don't feel like he gets a lot of attention, yet he performs really well. Look at who is behind him. Seb's behind him. Alex, Nico. There's a whole lot, Kimmy's back there. Romain's back there. I don't feel like he is highlighted enough, to be honest, yet he's quietly up there.
Well, you say all that, but Ferrari seems to appreciate his skill set.
True. Very true.
So anyway, yeah, it's this weekend. I think that looking at where we are, I'm going to go back to Vettel because putting in 10th place, a Ferrari in 10th place, it just doesn't make sense right now. And obviously the car's fast enough because Leclerc putting his car right on Max Verstappen's bumper in 4th place. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Can Vettel have a better race? Because he needs to. You talk about what's Vettel going to do next year. If he continues to not look good, where is he going to end up, Les? It's more than just his skill set bringing him to a team like Racing Point if that were to happen. But if he's not performing, then, what are you going to do? He could easily be out of Formula One if he doesn't perform any better. So,
well, John, don't lose any sleep. I think he's going to be okay no matter what he does. He just goes home and holds garage sales or gardening. But you're right. What does he do? Okay, I can't see him being behind a microphone. We've seen what he's like behind a microphone in the paddock. I don't see that changing. I think he's getting to the point that, quite honestly, I think he's burned out. He's not engaging well. He never has been much of a talker, but now he's even more aloof. If you watched the F1 broadcast over the past day or two.
Yeah, and the interview he did with Martin Brundle, that full in-depth interview. I mean, I thought he was a fairly personable guy, and anytime you got a four-time world champion, you're going to want to hear his insights. But I'm just saying he just hasn't performed on the track. But all right, so after Vettel, Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri Honda, and let's see, and right behind him is Alexander Albon. I think probably that's got to be one of the biggest surprises is Alexander Albon in that Red Bull car, which we obviously know is fast. But I mentioned earlier it's a tough seat to be in and to be Lewis Hamilton's teammate. But how about being Max Verstappen's teammate? I think I'd rather be Hamilton's teammate than Verstappen's because man, he is just brutally just outperforming every one of his teammates and did it again. What do you think about Albon? Well, first of all, what do you think about Albon's qualifying?
Albon, it was good. It's not as great as performance, but I'll roll it with it. You're right. I'd much rather be Hamilton's team partner because nobody expects you to beat them too much.
Yeah.
I think Albon really does need to pay attention. We started to talk about it a little bit earlier. Really does need to pay attention to what Pierre's doing because they could just as easily swap that seat back. That is a Red Bull team. I don't care what creative name they've added to it. That's a Red Bull team, and that's Red Bull money behind it. There have been rumors also that Alexander Albon got that seat because of his nationality. I don't know how much that's going to strengthen or reinforce staying in the primary seat in the seat on the primary team. It could, being that's who Red Bull's owned by, etc. I'm going to say watch Albon and Gasly really go at it as a midfield battle today.
Yeah, that's true.
Going to be a tough one.
That is true that he's starting right behind Gasly. So good point. All right, so right behind Albon, Nico Hülkenberg, and back in Formula One to replace Chico Perez, and his Q2 time was 1:26.5. And I was just looking, 1:26.566, looking at in the same car, Lance Stroll, his was a 1:26.501. So, the fact that he just jumped in the car this weekend and is performing this well, I think proves that they made the right choice to bring Hülkenberg in. He's looked great this weekend. And that's really going to be interesting. Think about this, Les. So he's going to have more time in to get into a rhythm in the race. And I wonder where he ends up finishing. I mean, what would be really interesting if he finished ahead of his teammate, Lance Stroll, of course. But I just, he's got the car, right? We know the Racing Point, Mercedes-powered Racing Point is fast. Mercedes designed almost. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he ends up during the race and see how well he does if he doesn't make any mistakes. So I think that's going to be one of the funnest stories to watch. So, all right, so right behind Hülkenberg is Daniel. What's that?
Nico cannot lose. That's it.
Well, that's true.
Nobody expects anything. He's already performed better than anybody expected. He's just what's likely only going to be a 2-race run, but he'll be just fine. And like I said, I just don't see him losing anything. I don't think his talent will allow him to hit the wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. If he doesn't just completely crash out and melt down, then he should be pretty relaxed in a way because of what you just said, is that, nobody's expecting him to come in and just, first of all, beat his teammate, which it's hard to do no matter, even if he's a raw, better driver, just hasn't had the time in the car. He hasn't gelled with the team, all those things. So he's got not a lot to lose.
Say a team name that I think should be looking at him.
What's that?
that you're about to say a team name that I should be looking at him when we get to spot number 14.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Daniel Kvyat at AlphaTauri was 14th. So you think that one of those seats might be filled by Hulkenberg next year?
Exactly. I think there's a lot of folks that ought to be reconsidering Hulkenberg.
All right, so that's right. Daniel Kvyat in 14th. George Russell qualified 15th. Will be starting 20th. He had another great qualifying at his home race in that car that's obviously not fast. You know, let's look at his time. So he had in Q1, Russell had a 126.7. Latifi, actually, Latifi was just about as fast. But the fact that George Russell is putting that car into Q2, I mean, just tells you where, you know, that he is a phenomenal driver. So, all right, and then behind Russell, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Haas not having a good weekend so far. They didn't really expect to. I heard Gunther Steiner before the weekend talking about it, just not really expecting to have a great weekend. And, you know,
Yeah,
I don't expect much from either driver this weekend.
yeah, he felt like this track was going to be a painful track to be at.
Yeah.
It's definitely a power track, and that's not what we've seen of that team, which is frustrating in a lot of ways to go into it and know that we're just looking at existing and surviving at the British Grand Prix. Haas has got to figure out a way to get it up there and get more out of that Ferrari. We're seeing better performances out of the Ferrari from the other teams, so we know it's capable. But when you're looking at something such as that, you got to question, what about the talent on the team that's around that Ferrari? Are they able to squeeze and get some more juice out of that and get up capable at least with, I'll say, running as a shadow of the factory team? That's been a frustration of my own as I look, and I'm certain that Gene and Gunther are saying something similar.
Yeah, and of course, anybody in a Ferrari-powered car this year, the power unit is not what it was last year, legal or not. And of course, the argument being that Ferrari was doing some things that they shouldn't have been with their engine, which have been a little bit behind closed doors, so we don't know exactly what all happened with that. But that's, to me, that's one of the reasons. Oh, I meant to try to find it. I saw a great tweet this weekend talking about, and I'll try to find those stats, but it was the difference between this year and last year on all the different cars. And the Haas team was down almost, I think it was almost a full second last year, from last year. And, you know, you think a good bit of that, depending on the circuit like this one, you know, they had tire troubles last year, but we're talking qualifying times where Haas last year was great all the way through the year. You know, they qualified in as high as what, 6th or 7th last year on the raw speed of that car with the Ferrari power unit. So, but yeah, Kevin Magnussen 16th, and then the two Alpha cars, Antonio Giovinazzi and Kimi Räikkönen in 17 and 18, then Grosjean, and then Nicholas Latifi. So I did enjoy qualifying because anytime you get a little action like that from Lewis Hamilton spinning and putting a red flag on it, so it was good. But hey, Les, let's go ahead and take our last break because we are now 18 minutes from the start of the race. And of course, stick with us here on the Dan Patrick Channel till 2:11 on SiriusXM because the entire race will be here because the BBC 5 Live broadcast will be doing the play-by-play, and then we'll be doing the post-race. But write down the number and give us a call, 512-643-5483, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hi, this is Gene Haas, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, I'm getting fired up. We got 15 minutes to the race. Formula One British Grand Prix coming up here. I want to talk about, Mr. Kaiser, I want to just run down what to look for today. We've talked a lot about the different drivers and cars and everything, but so to start off the top of the grid here, it's another dominant-looking Mercedes performance so far, and obviously Hamilton, Bottas are going to be the favorites to take the win. But I was thinking about it. Starts have not been they've not been the best for Lewis Hamilton. He's not bad at anything, but they've not always been their strong point. And Bottas also has had struggle starting. So we'll watch for that at the beginning of the race. And what about the first couple of corners? Turn 3 at Silverstone's a dangerous one, so watch out for that one because you're kind of flat out through the first two. So turn 3 might be. You remember when Kimi Räikkönen hit Hamilton? I think it was in that first braking zone. So watch out for that. And I'm trying to think of anything that could slow down Mercedes, right? The reliability of the Mercedes power unit occasionally it can raise a question mark because Hamilton took a new MG UK this weekend. And that was just a reliability update, but we got to keep an eye out for that. And so anyway, those are the things that I think could possibly slow down the Mercedes car. Max Verstappen in the battle, when you got him at the front of the grid, you never know what can happen. So you never know there. Leclerc giving some optimism to Ferrari, that he looked pretty fast. What do you think about, am I on the right track here, Les? No pun intended?
Absolutely. Spot on. It's one of those things, Max is an easy call out. And like I said, we could just take that clip and apply it every week that if Max isn't in front, watch for a barnstorm into it, the first turn. So I'm going to say folks to watch. Lando. Absolutely watch Lando on this. He can get it. He's much more cautious than Max is, and he's a good one to keep an eye on. Daniel Ricciardo deserves better than 8th place on the grid in my book, partly because I like the guy and he's fun. Second, because he is a legitimate quality racer under pressure. So I think you might watch him quietly move up through things.
Yeah.
Those would be a couple that I would want. And definitely Hulkenberg, he can't lose. What's he even doing there? It's a surprise. Come on in, buddy. You're going to do great.
You talk about Ricardo. We talked earlier about being Max Verstappen's teammate. Looking back, he was giving Max a run for his money. Now I know Max is, has had a couple of years to evolve, but if of all the drivers that have been opposite Max Verstappen, I think Ricardo's probably given him the best run for his money. So yeah, let's talk about Hulkenberg, right? Yeah, he's back in the paddock, so I want to see how that car does. Lando Norris, you touched on him to watch for him. He's going to hopefully get chasing some big points for McLaren. And I think McLaren as a team could pull some points this weekend. Let's see. What about, I'm just thinking about what else could change this thing up, what to look for today. I think one of the things we touched on earlier. Oh, by the way, on the television coverage there, they had a British Spitfire coming over the starting grid right now. Man, that is a cool looking plane. But what I was going to say is,
that harkens back to the history of this course.
That's right.
It is aircraft hangars back there. That's why they call it the Hangar Straight.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing I want to think about is the wind, right? Silverstone can be exposed, and you often see some wind gusts that makes the cars tricky to drive. And you think guys like Hamilton, that's really one of the things that makes them so good is they just kind of, when you watch Hamilton drive, especially when you get those post analysis when they put the whole thing in slow motion, and you just feel like Hamilton can deal with all those little things like the wind gusts and changes in traction so much better. But what I'm saying is that wind, it could be a factor today. So we'll see that, we'll see. I don't know what, the forecast right now. Everything looks good. I don't think any rain is an issue, but it is British summer, so you never know. We could see some rain. I doubt it, but
And speaking of weather, right now we're looking at about 70 degrees, and humidity is not bad at all. We're looking at about 51%. The wind, as you mentioned, about 11 miles per hour, and so things are warming up and getting there. Precipitation almost non-existent at 2%. So all good. Let's do this.
hey, did you see the comments from Max Verstappen about Hulkenberg? I thought this was really good because Max Verstappen was really kind of going on about how well Hulkenberg was doing. There's a couple quotes from here. He said, I could see after the first practice his neck was hanging to one side, said Verstappen. He said he has quite a long neck. But anyway, joking around, but he did say that, he said, Max said, you can train as much as you want. The first time you go in an F1 car at these speeds, especially around here at Silverstone, you'll be sore. And so he said, I know he's going to be sore. But he said that he was just going on about what a great job he did. In fact, so did others. Lewis Hamilton said Hulkenberg looked like he never left. And it's really true, man. The fact that he's done so well and coming back at this track, there's not any one Formula One track that you could say, well, I definitely want to come back there. But I think all the drivers have a lot of respect for him, and I think that it makes sense that he's there. But the fact that those two...
I like Lewis is saying, I wouldn't be surprised if he woke up this morning with a few more bruises and sore.
Yeah.
You're right. Harkening back to the G-force is not something you can really train on. And, there's plenty of strength things to work with, but that G-force can't be replicated.
Yeah, the mental aspect of all that. So, all right, let's see what do we got here. We are now from the start of the race, 8 minutes. So, and by the way, stick with us here on SiriusXM because you can hear the entire race, BBC 5 Live broadcast. They do a great job, so you'll be able to hear the entire race. But we're thinking about the circuit here and any, have you, besides the Mercedes powered cars, any particular team that you think will do well here based on the machinery they're driving? We always think about tracks and certain cars. Anything jump out at you? I have one idea, but I want to get your thought.
Red Bull is strong in those fast sweeping curves. I think that's good. We've seen them once they get set into a curve, they'll rip through it. And so I kind of feel like watch these guys in what they're going to pull out. As far as Centauri, they could make it. I'm going to rename that team just because I like it better. But I think the Red Bull guys are the ones to watch in how well they're going to perform through the corners. Mercedes will be there also, but we expect that. I just really like that. There's a lot of things. I like the fast cars through the curves, just flat out. And I think Red Bull is one to watch right now.
Yes, I was going to say McLaren is who I'm thinking. They've looked good this weekend, and I think that car seems to be suited for Silverstone for whatever reason this weekend. So, hey, there's a couple of good stats about this weekend's qualifying that I wanted to touch on. First of all, Hamilton is the first man to take 7 poles at his home event. And just be warned, a lot of these stats are Mercedes and Hamilton centric for obvious reason. Mercedes are the first constructor to take 8 consecutive pole venues at the same venue here at Silverstone. So Hamilton's 65th pole for Mercedes ties Ayrton Senna's career total. It's just an odd little stat there. This is the 25th pole position for a British driver at the British Grand Prix. Wow, Wow. Listen to this stat. Hamilton claims his 100th front row start for Mercedes in 144 starts for the team. And another stat that shows the dominance of Mercedes is they retake the front row lockout record. They took it from Ferrari with their 66th. I mean, think about this run before, where they were before this run. Like you'd look this and go, they would, they're going to take many, many years to catch Ferrari. You wouldn't expect them to have ever done it. So,
hey, we just got a heartbreak alert. Racing Point just shared that Hulkenberg will not take part in the British GP after an issue was discovered with his car leaving the garage to head to the grid.
Oh.
That was by Racing Point's Twitter page.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding. I saw.
Okay, we said he couldn't lose. He just lost, but it's not his fault.
That is truly, confirmed. Hulkenberg will not take the start after an issue discovered. Oh my gosh. The next tweet was gutted, absolutely gutted. Oh my gosh, man, that was, arguably the best story of the weekend. Just got the rug yanked out from underneath it. That is ridiculous. I was just about to say, Les, we just got a couple minutes before we go out to the BBC for the race broadcast. I was going to ask you your predictions for the race, including how well Hulkenberg would do, but there goes that out the window. Man, that is a huge bummer. What happened? And this literally just happened.
Yeah, do not know on that at the moment. As we, gosh.
Yeah, that
really does. Just got me and so many that were watching this guy, what he's done.
Yeah, and this all just happened in the last few minutes because, 20 minutes ago, I guess they got the word of it that the crew was working on his car. So Nico Hulkenberg, filling in for Checo Perez, will not start the race. All right, Les, we got about a minute or so. So let's hear who you want to win the race or wins or score some points, podium points, and then who do you think is going to win?
All righty, I think Lewis is going to win. I think.
Way to go out on a limb there.
Yeah. That's like I said. That's right there. Lando. I want to see Lando get up on podium, and I want to see Sebastian Vettel be a hard charger and get up near the podium.
I can see that, and it's about time you're finally getting on the Lando bus with me. I've been saying I was a big fan of Lando Norris for a year now, but.
I've been a fan. I just think he's just now getting everything collected and ready to go.
All right. So, I'm going to say that somehow something happens and Max Verstappen wins the race. I don't know what the heck could happen there. Some of the things that I talked about earlier, maybe a power unit failure, maybe the heat. So who do I want to see do well? I always want Lando to do well. I always want my Haas boys to do well. I don't know what well means for them this weekend. If they could beat the Williams cars and the Alfa Romeo cars, I would probably be happy with that. So, I think that's, it's funny. I've kind of become a Lance Stroll fan because he's shown that under the pressure of racing for his dad. So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hey, write the phone number down. Call us after the race, 512-643-5483. Stay tuned for the race broadcast from the BBC, and we'll talk to you after the race.